2015 is an election year in Argentina, and President Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner will be stepping down after 8 years in office. Of all the issues voters face, none is more important than the economy. The country made international headlines last year when it defaulted on its debt for the second time in 13 years. A long-standing legal dispute between Argentina and certain holders of its sovereign debt took a serious turn after a judge in New York decided in favor of the plaintiffs. It ordered Argentina to pay over $1 billion to the U.S.-based hedge fund Holdouts. The government refused to comply, and the case is still unresolved. Joining us now is Cecilia Nahon, Argentina's ambassador to the United States. She is here with a closer look at this dispute and the general state of the Argentinian economy. Ambassador, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for inviting us.
You know, where do things stand in this case? Because some people are calling it a default, but you do not. Argentina does not see it as a default. So how do you explain Argentina's position to the international community?
Thank you for asking. I think it's important to clarify that, in fact, Argentina is not in default, because a default means not paying. And Argentina has kept on paying its creditors since 2005, when we restructured our debt for the first time. But let me tell you where we come back, so you can understand why some people are confused about this. In 2001, Argentina had the highest, the more important default in history. The country defaulted on 81 billion of its sovereign bonds debt. And since then, since 2003, President Nestor Kirchner got to power, and then President Cristina Kirchner, the country made a huge progress in normalizing all our international financial relations. We solved all our debt issues. We restructured our sovereign debt with 92.4% of our creditors, but a small group led by vulture funds, very, very aggressive, speculative, predatory funds, have refused to accept Argentina's offer and have refused to accept the deal that the other 92.4% accepted. So that's why they call holdouts, because they are basically trying to sabotage the whole debt restructuring.
But most everyone has accepted the deal. They're happy with it. It's just the one or two that have refused to accept the money that you were trying to give them.
Exactly. Argentina restructured its debt in 2005 and 2010 with 92.4% of our creditors. A small group, 1% of the holdouts, didn't accept the restructuring. They are seeking, this is important, they are seeking a 1,600% profit. These are vulture funds because they specialize in buying debt that is already in default. They don't invest in the countries. They never invested in Argentina. They never lent money to Argentina. They got our bonds in 2008, that is 7 years after the default. They got the bonds for pennies on the dollar in the secondary market just to litigate against Argentina to make this unwarranted extraordinary profit. But what's very grave about this case is that they managed to get a judge in New York to support their claim. And at this point, they are blocking the collection of payments from Argentina to our 92.4% of creditors. They are holding hostage our creditors just to make these very, very excessive predatory profits.
How has this conflict affected your country's access to the resources it needs to finance investments within the country, like infrastructure, other areas?
Well, you know that Argentina in 2001 had one of the highest levels of debt to GDP ratio in the world. It was 166%, so we owed 1.5 times of our annual GDP. In fact, that's a level that many countries in the world, in Europe, for example, have now, and that's why they are facing a very challenging situation. But we learned our lesson. Argentina, since 2003, put in place a sustainable debt management strategy to make sure that we have a debt that we can honor, that we have a debt that we can pay. And in fact, that's what we have been doing since 2003. Argentina has been paying all its debts, reducing its debt to GDP ratio. And now we have a statistics that is only 40% of our GDP. So now we have a manageable debt, a sustainable debt, which is key for sustaining growth. And we did this accessing to the funds we needed for infrastructure investment, for our social programs, and to make sure that our growth process was sustained. And this implied access financing from international financial institutions like the IDB, like the World Bank, from bilateral countries, bilateral creditors like China and others that have been important in financing our infrastructure development. So we had the access we required. Only 2 weeks ago, we issued new debt under Argentine legislation in US dollars for $1.4 billion. So basically, we feel comfortable with our debt levels, and we are having a debt that supports and strengthens our growth process.
You are an ambassador, but you're also an economist. So are you comfortable with the state of your country's economy? You just explained some of what's been happening. Are you optimistic about it? And how would you project the rest of 2015?
Well, the world economy since 2008 has started first a very severe international economic crisis, which has not been recovered yet, but then into a very mediocre growth pace of growth, a really very mediocre level of growth. Within that context, the Argentine economy has really been very well equipped to face this very challenging international environment. And we have managed to keep a positive growth rate. For 2015, we are projecting a 2.8 rate of growth, which, considering the growth of our partners and of the world economy, it's a very positive one. And what's more important, we have put in place key counter-cyclical policies to face this international unstable and mediocre growth scenario. So we have policies basically that support our social inclusion programs, that support the productive sectors, that support the young people, to make sure that our unemployment rate keeps on at a low level. We are at a 6.9% of unemployment rate, which is a historical low for Argentina. To give you numbers, in 2002, after the very strong crisis that we had, the unemployment levels in Argentina were over 23%. So we went a long way since then. We recovered. We have an economy that, of course, still has challenges. We are working towards making a more industrial-based economy with more manufacturing growth, expansion and manufacturing jobs and adding value added. But in all these areas, we have been working very hard and really making a lot of progress. There's always more to go.
So progress and recovery, you would characterize the economy. I want to ask you about this dispute again with these banks in the United States, these hedge funds. Would you consider that it's changed or affected Argentina's relationship with the United States at all? Has there been any effect with bilateral relations?
Well, let me tell you two things about the U.S. and in general the international community. There's a before and after Argentina's sovereign debt case. And I think this is such because of mainly two reasons. First, the world has become conscious of the predatory behavior of these vulture funds. We just cannot allow very small, speculative, aggressive funds to sabotage sovereign debt restructurings, to go against sovereigns, to go against sovereign immunity. And the whole world has supported Argentina on this fight, including the United States, that has presented during the legal procedure legal documents stating that our position in this litigation was the right one, that you just cannot holdouts to go against the will of a country and of the majority of creditors. But there's also a very positive event, and I think that this has been a game changer, that due to Argentina's legal precedent, there's a global conversation, there's a global process of reform trying to change the rules in the financial markets to make sure this never happens again to other countries. So us has been a leading case for a process of reform. The G20, the G24, where China is part, the United Nations has been taking a very active stand on this issue, thanks to the support of the G77 plus China, a group of 133 countries, the IMF. So the support that Argentina has had in this dispute has been overwhelming.
Another case that has received a lot of attention globally was the death of Special Prosecutor Alberto Nisman, who had some serious allegations against the president. Where do things currently stand in that case?
Well, first, let me tell you that the baseless allegations that Mr. Nisman made against the president and the foreign minister were dismissed for the third and definitive time by our judiciary system, the independent judicial system, and this is mainly because of the inexistence of crime. There were no grounds to continue the case, so that case is dismissed. Argentina's fight against international terrorism, and in particular the commitment that we have in bringing truth and justice to the AMIA terrorist attack, is as strong as ever. If there's somebody and someone who has been a champion in moving forward the case, the AMIA case, and trying to get to the truth and justice, is the president and the government since 2003. So our commitment is there, and we are cooperating very active with the judicial system. And in particular regarding the tragic death of Prosecutor Nisman, again, the independent judicial system is going on with the investigation.
Ambassador Cecilia Nahon, we appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us here on America's Now.
Thank you, Elaine.
America's Now